This is in sharp contrast with the percentages of profitable businesses in each of the professional service categories listed in Table 8.2. What percentages were profitable? About 87.2% of the offices of physicians, 94.9% of the offices of dentists, 92.5% of the offices of veterinarians, and 86.6% of the offices providing legal services. Also examine the average return on receipts. On average, it would take $2.4 million in receipts for a coal mining operation on average to generate a net income of $196,600, approximately 8.2% of $2.40 million in receipts. What about physicians? The average net income of a physician's office is $87,000. That's 56.2% of the $154,804 receipts generated. With that kind of return on receipts, how many dollars in receipts would a physician's office have to generate to earn the same average net income that coal mining Boosie Ness's earned? $196,600? Only $349,800, a far cry from the $2.40 million required of coal mining operations. The figure's even lower. For osteopathic physicians, on average, they require receipts of $340,138 to earn the expected $196,600 in net income. Legal service providers, on average, would need to generate $414,800 in sales to earn what the average coal mine operation earned in net income. What will you advise David and Christy to do? If you're like most successful business owners, you will advise them to become professionals. So it is with the affluent in America. The first-generation affluent are typically entrepreneurs. They beat the odds. Their businesses succeed, and they become affluent. Much of their success depends on their living a frugal existence while building their businesses. Luck is often involved, and most who succeed understand that circumstances could have gone against them. Their children will have it better. They will not have to take can't risks. They will be well educated. They will become physicians, attorneys, and accountants. Their capital is their intellect. But unlike their parents, they will postpone entering the job market until they are in their late 20s or even their early 30s. And most likely they will adopt an upper-middle-class lifestyle as soon as they start work. A much different lifestyle than their frugal parents had when they started their businesses. Often their children are not frugal. How could they be? They have high-status positions that require higher levels of consumption and thus lower levels of investing. As a consequence, they may require economic outpatient care. In spite of earning high incomes as most professionals do, they are obligated to spend. Thus, because there are responding high levels of household spending requirements for many high-income producing categories of business, it is difficult to predict levels of wealth based on the income characteristics of various types of businesses. Dull equals normal businesses and the affluent. A recent article in Forbes had an interesting lead. Dull companies with steady earnings growth may not make for stimulating cocktail party chatter, but over the long term, they make the best investments. Fleming Meeks and David S. Fomdler, Dare to be Dull. Forbes, November 6, 1995, page 228. Later in the same article, the authors mentioned that in the long run, high-tech companies can and often do fall down on the performance scale. Typically, it's the companies in what we call the dull normal industries that consistently perform well for their owners. Forbes lists several top-performing small businesses that have had great endurance for the past 10 years. Some of the industries represented include wall board manufacturing, building material manufacturing, electronics, stores, prefab housing, and automobile parts. No, these industries don't sound very exciting. But typically it's these mundane categories of businesses that produce wealth for their own heirs. Often dull normal industries don't attract a great deal of competition, tie-in, and demand for their offerings is not usually subject to rapid downturns. We recently developed our own list of businesses that are owned by millionaires, see Appendix 3. We would like to list just a sample at this juncture, see Table 8.3. What businesses do the affluent own? A wide variety of dull normals. Risco our freedom? Why do people operate their own businesses? First, most successful business owners will tell you that they have tremendous freedom. They are their own bosses. Also, they tell us that self-employment is less risky than working for others. A professor once asked a group of 60 MBA students who were executives of public corporations this question: what is risk? One student replied, being an entrepreneur. His fellow students agreed. Then the professor answered his own question with a quote from an entrepreneur. What is risk? Having one source of income. Employees are at risk. They have a single source of income. What about the entrepreneur who sells janitorial services to your employee heirs? He has hundreds and hundreds of customers, hundreds and hundreds of sources of income. Actually, there is considerable financial risk in being a business owner. But business owners have a set of beliefs that helps them reduce their risk, or at least their perceived risk. I'm in control of my own destiny. Risk is working for a ruthless employer. I can solve any problem. The only way to become a CEO is to own the company. There are no limits on the amount of income one can make. Plus, I get stronger and wiser every day by facing risk and adversity. To be a business owner also requires that you have the desire to be self-employed. If you hate the thought of being outside the corporate environment, entrepreneurship may not be your calling. The most successful business owners we have interviewed have one characteristic in common. They all enjoy what they do. They all take pride in going it alone. Consider what a multimillionaire once told us about being self-employed. There are more people, employees, today working at jobs that they don't like. 1 foot 11 inches tell you honestly that the successful man is a guy who works at a job, who likes his work, who can't wait to get up in the morning to get down to the office. And that's my criteria. And I've always been that way. I can't wait to get up and get down to the office and get my job underway. For this fellow, a widower without children, it's not the money. In fact, his estate plan calls for all his wealth to go to the undergraduate scholarship fund at his alma mater. How did this fellow and others like him select the businesses they wanted to start? He was well trained in college by engineering and science professors, many of whom were also entrepreneurs. These professors were his role models. Most successful business owners had some knowledge or experience with their chosen industry before they ever opened their own businesses. Larry, for example, worked for more than a dozen years selling printing services. He was the top performer for his employer. But after growing tired of the constant fear that his employer would go bankrupt, he considered opening his own printing company. He sought our advice in this regard. We asked Larry a simple question. What's the number one thing that printing companies need? He immediately responded, more business, more revenue, more customers. Thus, Larry answered his own question. He did start his own business, but not his own printing company. He became a self-employed broker of printing services. He now represents several outstanding printing firms and receives a commission on every sale he makes. His business has little overhead. Before starting his own business, Larry told us he did not have the courage to be an entrepreneur. He told us that every time he even thought about going it alone, he encountered fear. Larry believed that the self-employed were fearless, that fear never entered their minds. We had to help Larry adjust his thinking. We began by explaining that his definition of courage was wrong. How do we define courage? Courage is behaving in a way that conjures up fear. Yes, Larry Kura. GS people, entrepreneurs, recognize the fear in what they are doing, but they deal with it. They overcome their fears. That's why they are successful. We have spent a considerable amount of time studying courageous people. Certainly Ray Kroc had enormous courage to think he could market food to the world. Remember that he was an ambulance driver on the front lines in World War I. So was Walt Disney. Lee Iacocca had to have enormous courage to tell Congress and the world that Chrysler would come back big time. He does not fit the strict definition of an entrepreneur, but in our minds he has entrepreneurial blood in his veins. Fear abounds in America. But, according to our research, who has less fear and worry? Would you guess it's the person with the $S mill Lion Trust account or the self-made entrepreneur worth several $million? Typically, it's the entrepreneur, the person who deals with risk every day, who tests his or her courage every day. In this way, he learns to conquer fear. We saved the following case study for last because in our minds it encapsulates the differences between PAWs and UAWs. Throughout this book, we have stressed that the members of these two groups have distinctly different needs. PAWs need to achieve, to create wealth, to become financially independent, to build something from scratch. UAWs more often need to display a high-status lifestyle. What happens when members of these two groups attempt to occupy the same space at the same time? As the following case study demonstrates, the likely result is conflict. Mr. W is a self-made millionaire with a net worth conservatively estimated to be over $30 million. A typical PAW, Mr. W, is the owner of several companies that produce industrial equipment, testing instruments, and specialty gauges. He is also involved in many other entrepreneurial activities, including real estate ventures. Mr. W lives in a middle-class neighborhood surrounded by people who have only a small fraction of the wealth he has accumulated. He and his wife drive full-sized General Motors sedans. His living and consuming habits are quite middle-class. He never wears a tie or suit to work. Mr. W enjoys venturing into, as he calls it, luxury real estate. I make money outside of the equipment business. In real estate, God continues to make more people, but he doesn't make any more land. You will make money if you're smart and you're choosy where you pick the spot. Mr. W is very picky indeed. He buys property outright or in part. Nership only when the price is right. He typically purchases property or a part ownership from an owner and/or a developer who is in great need of financial assistance. Recently, he uncovered yet another superior investment opportunity in Sun Country. Some poor guy was putting together a luxury high-rise condominium. For a builder to build, he had to have 50% of the units sold. So one went in and made a deal with him. L bought all of the units of the same style, floor plan, with a lot of leverage, and he got his money. And he built. Because I bought all the one style, anybody who wanted to buy that style had to see me. Like Monopoly, nobody else competes with me. One sell all. Write out all but one. But Mr. W does not even keep the one remaining unit for very long. He and his family use it for a short vacation or two. Occasionally, he invites his close friends to use it. Otherwise, he rents the remaining unit until it is sold. Why doesn't Mr. W maintain a more permanent presence in these condominium complexes? It's not his style. Most of the people who buy Mr. W's vacation condominiums are upper-middle-class UAWs. Mr. W and many of the buyers of his condominium units have had a number of disagreements in several of the complexes where Mr. W previously bought units, his buyers passed so many restrictive covenants that Mr. W was uncomfortable even spending vacation time in his condominiums. Thus, he felt compelled to sell that one remaining unit in each of these complexes.